Good evening.
You too.
I have a hard lesson tonight. It's hard for me because I keep remembering things I used to complain about. And tonight's lesson is entitled Man's Default Position, which is, as we will see shortly, to grumble and complain. God takes care of us in some strange ways. And one time God took care of me because I had a transportation need. And God gave me a very good working car for almost no money. It was a 1966 Chrysler Newport 4-door. And it ran like a top. There was only one problem with this car. It didn't have a reverse gear. And so when I drove the car, I had to make sure I always parked on a hill or parked with the front of the car going out of the parking place. It was very difficult, and I complained about that car. But it got me where I needed to go. It wasn't the best car in the world, but I complained about it. I grumbled about it, but God gave me a car to remind me that we are in a position where we can't complain. If we're alive and in our right mind, we really can't complain because we're headed to heaven. And we need to be reminded not to grumble. And I know, well, I don't know, but I assume that when you were a little kid, did you complain about the cafeteria food at school? And when you were really stupid, you complained about your mother's cooking? Anybody ever complain about their mother's cooking? Well, I did, and I had no right to complain about my mother's cooking because my mother was a magician in the kitchen. I don't know how she did it, but she had this magic that she could cook a pot roast on Sunday, and on Monday, those leftovers tasted better than they did the day before. And even more amazing, I'm showing my age here. She could go to the store and buy a box dinner, Chef Boyardee spaghetti dinner. Had everything in it. Had the spaghetti, had the sauce, had the cheese, the whole 9 yards. All you had to do was add the meat. Well, she would make that Chef Boyardee spaghetti, but for some reason I cannot explain to this day that it was at least 3 times better tasting the next day as a leftover than it was freshly made. She was a magician. But kids like to grumble and complain about their food. Sometimes it's a little strange. You know, some kids complain if the peas are too close to the potatoes. And sometimes kids do imaginative things when they don't like too many vegetables, like when your brother or sister's not looking, you take a big pile of your vegetables and put on their plate. And I know no one ever did that. All kinds of things people do in their default position of grumbling. We read about it in Exodus 16. If you'll turn in your Bibles to Exodus 16, beginning with verse 1, we're going to talk about a food grumble. A food grumble. That's all of Israel under the leadership of Moses, They set out from Elim, and all the congregation of the people of Israel came to the wilderness of Sin. The irony there is rich, isn't it? They came to the wilderness of Sin, which is between Elim and Sinai, on the 15th day of the second month after they had departed from the land of Egypt. And the whole congregation of the people of Israel grumbled. They grumbled against Moses and Aaron in the wilderness. And the people of Israel said to them, "Would that we had died by the hand of the Lord in the land of Egypt, when we sat at the meat pots and ate bread to the full. For you have brought us out into this wilderness to kill this whole assembly with hunger." Then the Lord said to Moses, "Behold, I'm about to rain bread from heaven for you, and the people shall go out and gather a day to portion every day, that I may test them whether they will walk in my law or not. On the sixth day, when they prepare what they bring in, it will be twice as much as they gather daily." So Moses and Aaron said to all the people of Israel, after entering, you shall know that it was the Lord who brought you out of the land of Egypt. And in the morning you shall see the glory of the Lord, because he has heard your grumblings against the Lord. For what are we that you grumble against us? And Moses said, when the Lord gives you in the evening meat to eat, and in the morning bread to the full, because the Lord has heard your grumbling, that you grumble against him. What are we? Your grumbling is not against us, but against the Lord. Then Moses said to Aaron, say to the whole congregation of the people of Israel, come near before the Lord, for he has heard your grumbling. And as soon as Aaron spoke to the whole congregation of the people of Israel, they looked toward the wilderness, and behold, the glory of the Lord appeared in the cloud. And the Lord said to Moses, I have heard the grumbling of the people of Israel. Say to them, at twilight you shall eat meat, and in the morning you shall be filled with bread. Then you shall know that I am the Lord your God. Then you shall know that I am the Lord your God. In the evening, quail came up and covered the camp, and in the morning, dew lay around the camp. When the dew had gone up, there was on the face of the wilderness a fine flake-like thing, fine as frost on the ground. When the people of Israel saw it, they said to one another, what is it? For they did not know what it was. And Moses said to them, it is the bread that the Lord has given you to eat. This is what the Lord has commanded. Gather of it, each one of you, as much as he can eat. You shall each take an omer, according to the number of the persons that each of you has in his tent. And the people of Israel did so. They gathered, some more, some less. But when they measured it with an omer, whoever gathered much had nothing left over, and whoever gathered little had no lack. Each of them gathered as much as he could eat. And Moses said to them, let no one leave any of it over till the morning. But they did not listen to Moses. Some left part of it till the morning, and it bred worms and stank. And Moses was angry with them. Morning by morning, they gathered it each as much as he could eat. But when the sun grew hot, it melted. On the sixth day, they gathered twice as much bread, 2 omers each. And when the leaders of the congregation came and told Moses, he said to them, "This is what the Lord has commanded. Tomorrow is a day of solemn rest, a holy Sabbath to the Lord. Bake what you will bake, and boil what you will boil, and all that is left over lay aside to be kept till the morning." So they laid it aside till the morning, as Moses commanded them, and it did not stink, and there were no worms in it. Moses said, "Eat it today, for today is a Sabbath to the Lord. Today you will not find it in the field. 6 days you shall gather it, but on the seventh day, which is a Sabbath, there will be none." On the seventh day, some of the people went out to gather, but they found none. And the Lord said to Moses, "How long will you refuse to keep my commandments and my laws?" So there you have it. Manna in the wilderness. So we want to make some observations. An omer is about 2 quarts. And I've been thinking about this manna. It's kind of like a fine, powdery substance. And the way it's described, I'm convinced that it was freeze-dried and powdered Krispy Kreme donuts. Because you think about it, Krispy Kreme donut is useful for all kinds of things. The latest thing, you may have seen it on the internet. You take a Krispy Kreme donut and slice it in half and use it for a hamburger bun. I haven't tried it, but hey, you never know.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
But they had this bread could be used in any number of ways, apparently. We don't have the recipes, but you could bake it, you could fry it, you could boil it, you could eat it with milk maybe, or water. Who knows? But there were a lot of ways that you could have. You could have a manna sandwich, you could have a manna pancake, you could have a manna soup, cold or hot. You could have baked manna, fried manna, boiled manna, air fried manna. Who knows? It was a lot of options. But that was kind of a shock to them. They didn't know what was coming. But so here we want to talk about some things, and especially this first thing, their default. When anything happened they didn't like, they grumbled and they complained. And that's just kind of the way humans are. That's our first inclination. Our default position is to grumble and complain. They hadn't thought about how God had taken care of them, how he had saved them from the Egyptians, killed the entire Egyptian army, that they had been given water, and then they went to an oasis where there were 12 springs of water and 70 palms. They lived like kings. Now they're on their way again. They're journeying up to Sinai, and halfway between Elim and Sinai is this place called the Wilderness of Sin. And as well, if you've been on a long hike, after a while you get hungry. So they got hungry. Well, what did they do? Or what did they not do? They didn't ask Moses what were they going to do. They didn't pray to God and ask God to provide. They didn't wait on the Lord and see his provision that would come, just like it did with the water at Marah, and also on the beach at Baal Zephon, where they saw the entire Egyptian army drowned in the sea. No. What was their default position? Oh, you brought us out here, Moses, to die in the wilderness. It's just better off if we just died in Egypt. Then it got worse. Okay. Just think about it for a minute. These are people who have tasted freedom for the first time in their life. They've been liberated and freed from slavery of the Egyptians. And it was awful. But what do? In their grumbling and their complaining, they just keep piling on. So that's the second point. They pile on. Adding, as we say, insult to injury. Hey, at least when we were slaves down in Egypt, we had meat to eat and bread to eat till we got full. They forgot to remember, but you were slaves. You were slaves. Who cares how much food you had or didn't have? You were slaves. You weren't free. Now you are free, and God is here to protect you and guide you and sustain you if you just wait on the Lord.
Also, it's not like Egypt has any of that food anymore.
That's right. Yeah, they were pretty much they were kind of like off the world scene for about 100 years. It appears to get over that thing, but they just don't get it. And before we, climb on their case, we don't get it. We don't get it. I know you gave me a car, God, but why doesn't it have a reverse gear? Well, does it get you where you need to go? Yeah. Are you
more creative with how you park at parking?
Well, at least I'm not puffed up with pride because I have the nicest car on the block. No. We have to keep things in perspective. So it's interesting. Well, interesting is probably not the best word. It's amazing to see God's response. What does God respond? He doesn't respond with fire from heaven or pestilence or disease or anything like that. He says, I'm gonna feed them. I'm gonna feed them. You need to expect the unexpected. And the most unexpected thing you would think God would do with this kind of rebellion is to feed them. That's what God does. He feeds them. And guess what? You said you had meat pots back in Egypt and you had bread back in Egypt. I'm going to show you meat and I'm going to show you bread like you've never seen before. And that's what he does. And I've never had this. Obviously, I've never had manna, but I've never had quail without buckshot. You always have to pick out the buckshot out of your quail if you get it from the old-fashioned way, going out and hunting for it. But the quail shows up and the manna shows up. And God says, I got a plan for you. This is not a one-time event. Not a one-time event. I'm going to give you this manna every day for 6 days, and I'm going to give it to you twice on Friday. So Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, 1 day's provision in the morning on each of those days. But on Friday morning, since the next day was the Sabbath, Saturday, you instead of gathering up 2 quarts of manna, you gather up 4 quarts. And if you try to save manna during the week for the next day, it spoils. But on Friday, what you save on Friday is just as good on Saturday as it was on Friday. God's miraculous provision. Fourth point we need to remember. Who are we grumbling? Who are we grumbling to? When we grumble and complain about our job, about our income, about our housing, our automobiles, whatever it might be. We want to blame somebody. And we grumble. Well, who are we grumbling to? We're grumbling to God. Because where does all this come from? It comes from God. And He's going to give us what we need. He's going to give us what we need. And sometimes what we need is less than what we think. Because what 30-year-old guy wants a 66 Newport? This was 1982. I wanted a brand new Olds Cutlass. That's what I wanted. And all my friends were driving Olds Cutlasses and Monte Carlos and, all kinds of fancy things. Why can't I have one? Well, God says, you need to get to work. I'm going to get you to work, and I'll take care of you. So this grumbling complains, and the glory of the Lord comes, and that evening the quail comes. They have a big, I guess, quail barbecue. I don't know. A lot of quail. It takes a lot of quail to feed a couple of million people, I suspect.
Should have covered the can.
Yeah, it had to. Because the last time I ate quail was when my uncle shot some back in the early 70s sometime. Last time I went with him to go hunting. And as I recollect, there wasn't much meat on those quail. You had to eat a good number to get your fill. But they got their fill. And the next morning they got the fill of this bread. It was sweet and savory. Apparently had coriander in it. Is coriander, is that sort of like licorice? What's coriander?
I'm gonna have to look that up.
Some kind of spice. And so when it came, so the next thing is seldom.
It's in the parsley family.
Okay. Sounds tasty.
Native to the Mediterranean. Sounds legit.
Okay. Our blessings are seldom recognized, at least in the moment. This was the case here. God told them they was going to have bread in the morning. They go out and they see this stuff on the ground, and they say, oh, what is this? Moses had to tell them what it was. He told them yesterday they was going to get bread. This morning they get this manna. There it is. They didn't recognize it. They had no clue about God's blessing.
It's known for its complex flavor profile, described as a musky aroma with a citrusy twang. The leaves are called cilantro in the U.S., and some describe their taste as fresh and slightly citrusy.
Mm-hmm.
However, genetic variations can make some people perceive a soapy, pungent, or rotten taste.
Well, anyway, Moses has to explain to them the obvious. This is the Lord's provision. That 66 Newport was the Lord's provision. It could have been worse. And yeah, it was worse earlier when I bought a 67 Chevrolet Impala as an investment. I was going to restore it, paid $500 for it. That all came to an end when I was driving down the Broadway extension in Oklahoma City to work one morning. It was still dark, and all of a sudden, I think I've told this story before, I hear this and feel this thump, and my car starts to slow down, and I look up and I see the right front wheel rolling down Broadway extension in front of me, going much faster than my car. Fortunately, the tire went off to the side, and that was the end of that. So the Lord gave me that Newport. Nancy didn't like that car for some reason. But hey, we made it. We made it. Sometimes I have to tell you about all my cars. I had the worst history with cars. I probably one of the few people that was I don't know what to call it, but I own both a Pinto and a Vega. And the Pinto had a stick shift, and I never could get Nancy to learn how to drive a stick shift. To this day, she can't drive a stick shift. So that didn't work out. And the Vega, that thing took 30 minutes to warm up in the wintertime before you could get it out of the driveway. What a pile of bolts that thing was. So I didn't have a good track record on cars back in the early days, but God always provided. I always got to work, and Nancy always got to work. We always got to where we needed to go. And so it is with God's provisions. We don't always recognize God's provision because we're just so consumed about our grumbling, our complaining. Why did all this happen? It's so amazing. In this passage, we see that, guess what? The Israelites are just like the Egyptians. And the Egyptians are just like the Israelites. Because in all the plagues, what does God tell Moses to tell Pharaoh? But this is going to happen to you so that you will know that I am the Lord. That's the same thing he tells the Israelites. You're going to see meat at night and bread in the morning, so you'll know that I am the Lord, your God. And that I'm going to take care of you, not because of you, but in spite of you. because my love for you is greater than your grumbling. Your grumbling cannot overcome my love. And people say, well, the God of the Old Testament is mean and vicious. This is not mean, it's not vicious, it's loving. Because if you stop to think about it, did these people deserve quail and manna? I don't think so. But that's what they got. They got the good when they deserved the evil. And the last thing. And this is hard lesson for me because I never learned it when I was in school. Pay attention. Pay attention to what God says. It's important. He told them, gather it once a day, Sunday through Thursday, and don't gather anything extra Sunday through Thursday. What do? They gather extra. And what happens?
Someone tried to anyway.
It turns rotten and has worms in it. That was totally unnecessary because they didn't listen. Just get your 2-quart Omer jar out there and fill it up and go home. No, they wanted to pile it on. And then they didn't listen. Some of them, even though God had said, don't go out on the Sabbath day because I want to give what you need the day before. What do?
Some of them tried it.
Yeah. They went out and said, where's our food? And God gave them something they never had back in Egypt. It was a day off. You know, if you're a slave, you don't get a day off. It's a 7-day, 365 thing. But God gives them a day off. You can stay in your house and eat what I gave you yesterday and believe me that it's going to last like I told you it would. Don't grumble. Don't complain. Be thankful. Be thankful. That needs to be our default position. A thankful person is a blessed person. Even in the worst of circumstances, things could be worse. Whatever the circumstance is. You may complain about leftovers, but guess what? Look at all the people in the world who have no leftovers. They wouldn't know what a leftover was if you wrote it down on a 3-dimensional document of some sort. Totally foreign. You know, I complained about that old Chrysler, but look at all the people in the world that didn't have cars. People don't have cars. They don't have roads. They don't have gasoline. They have no way of getting anywhere. They're not free. They have to spend all day and all night looking for food to feed them and their families, and water to feed them and their families. That's life.
Yep.
It could be a lot worse. And if you're in that situation, you're not dead. I mean, it could be worse. It could be worse. Thank God for your circumstance. If you get up in the morning and you're in your right mind, God is going to take care of you. You do not have to grumble. You don't have to complain because God wants to take care of you like children that are appreciative. Wasn't it funny when we were kids? How much better it would, I was so dumb. I mean, complain about mom's food. What was I thinking? Because if I'd just been thinking, if I would tell mom how great the food was and how much I enjoyed it, especially when there was company, I'd get a lot of brownie points and I might avoid that wooden spoon next time. Thankful people are blessed people. And it doesn't matter what you have or don't have, because God is there. And He's going to provide for you what you need. Grumbling and complaining is not necessary when it comes to God. That's our lesson tonight. If there's anybody who needs to make things right with God, won't you come while we sing to encourage you?
Number 295.